want to kick off something we basically the world found out on January 1st, or I think it was like right before. I think it was actually New Year's Eve, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, MF Doom passed in October, and it was actually kept very much under wraps until the new year. So, Phoenix, I guess I'll start with you. I just want to hear your thoughts on MF Doom's legacy and really how Doom sits with you as an artist.
It's tragic. First of all, it's tragic and it's heartbreaking. I don't want to come on here. I don't want to come on here and cap though, right? Like I wasn't the ultimate MF Doom fan,
Me
but I
neither.
think every hip hop head has to have a MF Doom phase. And
Yes.
every hip hop head, every backpacker, if you really say you like backpack rap or lyrical underground, kind of message focused rap, like you have to have a phase where you go through MF Doom's catalog because then it kind of informs you of why the rest of the sound sounds the way it does, honestly. Because he was that influential, I think, in terms of being a figurehead for underground hip hop, and that influential in terms of keeping the kind of lyrical integrity he had and musical integrity. Kind of the whole mantra of Doom's music always felt like to me of like, I put on the mask in direct kind of rebellion towards like mainstream music, and kind of what consumerism and with the expansion of hip hop, kind of how that influenced the music. And I'm sure we all know examples of how the sound of hip hop has changed as it's become more popular. It's become more of an industry and a business.
Right.
And Doom has always been the guy that's I don't know. He's stood solid. Can't speak right now, but he stood solid in that position, and the music was just was always very like. There's no way to describe it besides unique to him, to his voice, and consistent. It sounds honest. Besides, and then in addition to that, I think probably the most compelling and interesting, not facade, but I don't even image. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the whole villain, the villain mask, the villain kind of theme, and the character building and almost world building that he does in his music. I think that's commendable no matter what, whether you like his music or not. If you kind of do some of the background and just like the kind of whole gist behind the mask, and it's more than just like a quirky kind of like 90s hip hop kind of thing. It's it was a real metaphor, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and I think that was the dopest part. That's obviously why we all love Doom. And it was heartbreaking for me to hear about him passing, and super eerie, but like kind of cool. I want to say that respectfully. The fact that he had passed on Halloween night kind of just seems like a weird, like bittersweet ending. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Halloween night, where people already put on masks and costumes, just seems kind of funny that we lost somebody who in hip hop has a mask and has a costume on that night.
Yeah,
But
that was actually interesting and a little bit symbolic. Do we know how he passed? Has it come out like how? At
I
this
don't think
point?
it's come out officially, but I've heard on the internet that he was having health problems for a while, and it might have been something connected to his heart. But what I've heard is that it just wasn't sudden. It wasn't super sudden for their family. I think it was something they were kind of preparing for a while. But don't take my word for it. I don't think we've gotten much information.
Yeah, that's why I asked it, because I wasn't sure what you had heard, because it seems like it was pretty under wraps in
Yeah.
terms of Doom. And I mean, I agree with a lot of the sentiments that you had about Doom. I too was not really like the biggest Doom stan, but I certainly had my Doom phase.
Have to if you love hip hop.
Yeah. And over the years, I grew to, even if Doom wasn't my most listened to artist or anything like that, over the years, I really grew to respect and like appreciate what he was and what he brought to the table, because like you said, he was such an influential character. We actually had Lord Felix from Van Buren on the show very early in 2020, and he wears a mask too, or a visor really, and he actually talked about a little bit about how Doom like spoke to him. And I think he's not the only one. I think you can see the influence locally here and just in Boston and in Massachusetts, but then you can see the the influence outside of that too, just in the hip hop, spectrum. And I think for Doom, what he stood for beyond anything else was, like you kind of said, that almost anti-consumerism, feeling. He had that image, and
Definitely.
in his music, he was very much so kind of like, you can be, kind of, for lack of a better word, I guess, like nerdy and almost like a hip hop kind of. He was a hip hop head that wasn't at the time, like in the '90s. It was much more of like the gangster rap out, in the West Coast, and then some of like the boom bap in the East Coast. And MF Doom, if you didn't fit either of those molds, Doom was perfect because he was, and I think it was good for anybody that was a little more artsy and a little bit more eccentric and sort of just out there. He was more of like, somebody that if you didn't fit either of those molds, like he was perfect for that. You know what I mean? And just kind of like being a different sort of figure in hip hop. That's why I think with Doom, his legacy is going to go down as probably one of the most influential hip hop artists of all time, because I think that's where the experimental nature kind of comes in. Like, I don't think you get a JPEG Mafia or a Denzel Curry, or, I mean, I even know like a mutual friend of ours, like Taha, like he loved Doom so much as well. Like, I feel like there's certain artists that get into that experimental nature of their music. It really kind of rooted from Doom in a sense. And the album to me that's always stood out so much that was Madvillainy with Madlib, because Madlib is just one of my favorite producers ever. He's up on the wall. I got him with Bandana and Freddie Gibbs over there. Like,
he's still going crazy.
Exactly. And like, I always loved Madlib's production, and it's interesting, believe it or not, I didn't really get like I'd heard Madvillainy over the years and I always liked it, but for some reason this past summer, actually, I was out, it's weird how this happened, but I was out in my yard just doing yard work, and for some reason, like in my shuffle on Spotify, it must have passed like whatever album I was listening to, and a Doom song came up, and I was like, oh, I haven't listened to MF Doom in forever. That was my thought process. And I'm like, oh, I got to go back and listen to Madvillainy. And for some reason this summer, Madvillainy clicked for me in a way that it never had. And or maybe I just forgotten about I've forgotten about it. Maybe I hadn't listened to it in a while. And I was like, oh, why don't I listen to this more? You know what I mean? Like, even just some of the beats and production.
Yeah.
So
that's the kind of hip hop he has, right? Because I think any good hip hop or any good songwriting in general always rewards closer attention, right? Like, or a second listen, a third listen. I think no matter what, all of the good music you like are, especially when it's like kind of lyric centric hip hop. What really proves that it's good is when you come back and you're like, wow, I just got what he said. Right. Wow, that was a reference to a comic book, this really abstract comic book. Or, wow, I just realized. What happens with me, I find a lot, is that like there's always a punchline I love a lot in a song, whether it's Doom or Kendrick or anybody lyrical. Always a punchline that kind of really stands out, but then maybe you go back a second, third, fourth time, and then you just kind of connect the 4 connecting bars prior to that punchline. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
'Cause the punchline sits in a pocket that's clearly a punchline, so you kind of digest that quicker. But definitely with Doom, like especially like Rhymes Like Dimes is one of my favorite tracks of all time, and like there are all the punchlines you kind of just know word for word after listening to it for so long, and you just forget about some of the things that set up those punchlines, or even some of the small bars that maybe could have been punchlines but just weren't put in that pocket, and you kind of have sung second, like subconsciously without really connecting it. Doom has tons of that kind of content where you're like, wow, when I actually just recognize what he said right now, just took this from an 8 to a 9 or a 9 to a 10. He has a lot of that in his catalog.
Yeah, and admittedly, like, I need to go back even further into some of his stuff, because I was never I think I listened to it a long time ago. Who's a big MF Doom guy, and who kind of inspired me to like really want to start like sharing my opinions on music and things like that was obvious. I mean, a lot of us, he's kind of the godfather in the sense of this, but like if Fantano and the Needle Drop, he freaking loves Doom. The Dead End hip hop guys, I used to listen to them like growing up and when I was a little younger, and like they always talked about
so much.
Yeah, me too. And so shout out to them, obviously, because like again, I used to consume their content like crazy. Still do a little bit here and there, but
Definitely.
I definitely think that they kind of inspire me to be like, oh yeah, I can jump on here and talk about music too. Like I have as much passion about it as they do,
1000%.
and yeah, so like for them, like they always talked about Doom all the time, especially to Fantano, like the Czarface, like what's it called, duos that they used to do with Czarface, and just a lot of those albums that I never really like fully fleshed out and listened to, or maybe I listened to them when I was too young to like really appreciate and understand. I think because I think, like I said, it was weird being in my mid-20s. Madvillainy clicked for me in a way that it never had before.
That's really funny you say that, because I also feel that. I actually, like I went back to Madvillainy after hearing about the death of MF Doom, right? Whether it's just to reminisce about the music, or honestly, I wanted to like go run those streams up. Like I want him to be supported because he deserves it. But it's funny you say that, because I loved Madvillainy when I first heard it, and I have my phase in my dark. It's definitely around these kind of seasons too, when it's kind of wintry. I get my phase where I go back into the lyrical, like real cold, stuff.
Exactly.
And but I hadn't gone back to Madvillainy in a while, and I go back after his passing. And there was a lot of other stuff that resonated with me too, and whether even if it was lyrics I remembered or would always kind of, even whether it's songs that I know and love or some songs that I had forgotten about, there was a lot of stuff that resonated differently for me.
Exactly.
At this age, which I think is amazing, and that's again the testament to really great timeless music.
Yeah, no, and that is what I think sets Doom apart, was he was such a thinking man's MC, your favorite rapper's favorite rapper type deal. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you saw how many rappers were coming out and just being like, hey, like, Doom was so influential to me and so important to this game and everything like that. So no, I mean, it's definitely very upsetting, and I think we're getting to that age though where it's like we're gonna start to see some of our favorite like artists as kids or things like that. Like I don't think we're there quite yet, but I think this is just kind of the beginning of it, stages of it, where it's like, it's going to be one of those things like you'll remember where you were when you heard, like, for example, like when Michael Jackson died, you know what I mean? Like Definitely. I can remember where, even though I didn't grow up with Michael Jackson, right? But I even remember where I was and like when I heard that, you know what I mean? And I just knew him as such a figure. So I think there's going to be like certain artists like this that, eventually we're going to be like, whoa, like, yeah. And that begs another question too. It's like, I feel like we appreciate artists a lot more when they're dead versus when they're alive half the time, because it's like, again, and I was happy this summer to have gone back to just happened to stumble upon Madvillainy again. And again, I listen to so much music. There's sometimes I just forget about certain albums. Like I'm just like, oh my God, how did I forgot about this? I haven't heard this in months or years or whatever it is. So like, it was so fun for me over the summer to get back. And that's funny you mentioned that you're getting into it a little bit more in the winter, whereas like, for some reason it clicked for me in the summer, even though it's definitely not a summer album. It's definitely not a summer album at all. But like, and then I don't know, and then just going through the track listing, even though he's not even on the song, a song like Sick Fit with that insane instrumental I just love so much. Like there's just, again, it was more nostalgic for me to go back to an album like that and just really sit with it and appreciate it in a way that I hadn't before. So I mean, Doom I think is one of those kind of pillar hip hop figures that I think will go down as, one of like the founding fathers of this kind of new era of experimental, artistic, kind of a different level of like artistic hip hop, alternative hip hop, if you will.
1000%. I think it's already kind of set in stone. I think his legacy's already there. And I hope kind of actually what you mentioned with Michael Jackson, when I was young, I was like 8 or 7 or 9, maybe 10. I don't know. When Michael Jackson died, I remember being in my kitchen when I was younger, and I think maybe
I was in my kitchen too.
That's funny.
I was watching on this small back then. Like the TVs weren't flat screen. I think I was like an 8th grade or like a freshman in high school.
Right.
And I remember this specifically. it was during the summer, and I had a summer league basketball game, and pretty sure it was going into my freshman year, and. It's weird how I remember all these weird things, but like I watched it on this tiny little TV in my kitchen back in the day, and then I was on my way to going to a basketball game, and I remember it was a cloudy day. It wasn't very sunny. It was a dreary day, and it's weird that I remember certain things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, like you mentioned. So I feel like now, like I'm always gonna remember like hearing the MF Doom, like it was because it was so like it was New Year's Eve. Like I was like,
Right.
was like,
yeah, that was shocking. That was shocking.
it
for
was.
Sure.
It
But
was.
after Michael died, like I feel like for me growing up, he was always the butt of the joke. You know what I mean? Like for me growing up, I feel like as a little kid, obviously I was really young, but I didn't have enough or the proper respect for Michael Jackson, although he was still so culturally ubiquitous. Like I knew who his name, knew who he was, knew why he was famous, but never had enough music played around me to where I was like really invested in the music. And then after he died is kind of when you see, like you're saying, nobody really. It's like everybody loves you more till everybody loves you more when you're dead. Kind of like Biggie says, you're nobody until somebody kills you. Is which is a really eerie, scary lyric from Big. But I just remember with the whole world kind of reflecting on Michael Jackson and, everybody grieving and also celebrating his life and then celebrating his music. That's what put me onto, and I think a lot of people my age, onto Michael Jackson's music, right, is like it was a kind of a posthumous like shift in the way that we all looked at him. Because before that, he was, because of his accusations and the controversy surrounding him, I just didn't have the right narrative. You know what I mean? I didn't have the right narrative created around him. I had something that was, off of the South Park episodes where they make fun of him. Like that was kind of the image that was in my head for Michael Jackson. And I know this is something that's been talked about before, so I'll speed it up. But I hope that same kind of thing happens for Doom. You know what I mean? I hope there was hundreds of thousands of kids out there who didn't hear about MF Doom, but yet are big Tyler the Creator fans. And when you hear Tyler the Creator and Earl Sweatshirt, grieving over MF Doom, I hope there was a bunch of kids out there like, why is, kind of like you're saying, my favorite rapper's favorite rapper just passed. Let me go look into that. And I hope that really opened up and broadened people's horizons to his music, because and I would assume that it's happened, because that's the same thing that kind of happened with me with Michael Jackson. So I hope that's happened, because I just think he deserves that. You know what I mean? He deserves that kind of recognition, and he's kind of one of those things, purposefully probably, and intentionally. He kind of has always been low key, the kind of epitome of underground. But I hope now, after his passing, and after we had that moment where everybody was reflecting, I hope there are some new Doom fans. And if you are a new Doom fan, let us know.
That's yeah, new or old. Like, drop us a comment. Let us know your
Definitely.
favorite Doom songs, favorite Doom projects or moments and things like that. Like for me, like I said, definitely Mad Villainy. But I love what you said just now, because it's so true. It's like I didn't think of it that way as much, where it's like this could be an opportunity to even get people more acquainted with Doom that never were, and really, or remind us that like, oh hey, Doom has a catalog that I haven't listened to in years, like, or whatever it is. And speaking of Earl and Tyler, did you see that video that's been circulating with when they meet Doom and they're like
freaking
oh
out
my
when
God,
they're
they're
meeting
freaking
Doom.
out.
Yeah. Well, without him, there's no them, And I think
That's
Doom's
so
in a
true. I
similar
know
place.
exactly. He's
where,
another
like,
guy I forgot. Yeah,
Kid Cudi, you know what I mean? Like I usually, I'm the guy who will always chalk it up like, if it wasn't for Kid Cudi, like I'm the guy that's always like that. But Doom is a real the predecessor or whatever. What's the one that comes before?
Predecessor. Yep.
Like
Yep.
predecessor.
You got it.
In terms of that niche or that niche, however you want to say it, of the rapper who doesn't fit the mainstream mold, which at the end of the 90s towards the 2000s and still now obviously was much more like gangster, street, hyper masculine, you feel me, like very aggro type stuff. And like, Kid Cudi, I think, gets a lot of credit for being somebody who like just stepped out of that mold while keeping it hip hop, and he inspired a lot of kids to be themselves. In the same way that I credit him with kind of other people in the new school now. Like without Kid Cudi, there wouldn't be any of them. I definitely solidly feel that like without MF Doom, like I think he's the predecessor even for Kanye. Not to say that they're musically the most similar, but in terms of a figure, a rapper, who's is sticking with their narrative and their truth and their story. You know what I mean? Not kind of just camouflaging themselves into what was happening around them, and then serving a lot of listeners who didn't ideally or you match up with like the typical rap listener. Like Doom was right there, you know, whether it's the nerdy ass references or just like the really dense material that like you have to literally just be into the music in order to really digest, you know what I mean? Because
Exactly.
casually throw on MF Doom in the background, it's going to go over your head.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's
you
why
can't.
I recommend getting in a dark room, being really sad, and, you know,
Just get
closing
super
the windows.
depressed before you listen to Doom. Just,
Right.
Just break
Right.
break up with your significant other. Friggin'
Yeah, dude. And
Dude, no, I'm kidding.
he's
That's not
he's
a good
one of
breakup.
those, you know?
Yeah. No, but like even when you like, I didn't even think of like Tyler. Like he's another part. Like there's just so many. Like again, I was thinking more along the lines of like a JPEG or, David Denzel Curry. But yeah, guys like Earl, Tyler the Creator. I mean, you're not getting those guys at all if you don't without
At
Doom.
all.
And again, Cuddy I think is in the same mold where you're not getting like a Travis Scott. You're not going to get a Juice WRLD. You're not going
Right.
to get those types of artists without a Kid Cudi. But I agree. I think without Doom and those types of artists, I think even Tribe Called Quest a little bit has some place in that too,
100%.
for sure for these types of
Yeah.
artists. Not
And
that,
Tribe Called Quest might be even the more mainstream version of that because they are able to cross over mainstream where
Exactly.
Doom's music is so gritty and weird and he keeps it like that all the
Complex.
time.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and another guy too that I feel that I can very vividly remember when he passed was actually I was with our producer Sam. I was living with him at the time. Actually, he's been a friend of mine for a very long time. But when Mac Miller passed away, was another one, and like because I was somebody that I vividly remember kids just being played nonstop through my friend group. Through really when we were all in high school, like that was kind of the hot. He was like the hot, hip hop artist or rapper at that time. Like him and Wiz. I feel like I would just remember all those different mixtapes and projects. And I just remember Sam and I sitting in our living room for like a half an hour, 45 minutes. We threw on, I think like we shuffled like Mac Miller songs and we just listened to Mac for 45 minutes. We didn't say a word. And he would definitely attest to this too. He was like, we didn't speak for 45 minutes. Just like so solemn and just like, wow, like this is one of those like pillar moments of like artists that we grew up with that is now not here. And so when Doom died, it was more for me like wow, the culture just kind of lost somebody. You know what I mean? Because I again, even though I was never like a Doom stan, I completely understood and heard like and knew that he was such a figure, and of course liked some of his music for sure. Need to get a little bit more familiar with some of it because there's just so much of his. But with Mac, I always grew up with his progression, and just Mac Miller was somebody that. And I think Nipsey Hussle was a bit of the same too. I kind of put Nipsey Hussle in the same category as like a Doom, where it was like I didn't get more acquainted with Nipsey until after he passed. Versus like I had heard certain songs and liked some of his music, like his Crenshaw mixtape. I had heard when it came out, liked that. But Nipsey wasn't a guy that I was like on from the get. I was like, I was
Definitely.
stan,
And
like,
that's
you know what I
most
mean?
people. That was most people.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, again, it's an interesting conversation to, how, and again, even like an artist that we've had on before who just dropped an album kind of talking about this was Hero the MC. Shout out him. He's a Roxbury, Massachusetts artist. And he had an album kind of dedicated to Guru and Rakim because those are like big, influences for him. And, he has a lot of that commentary on his album is very much like, we need to love, our artists while they're here. And again, it's a hard concept, but there's something about this posthumous, like, once you're dead and gone, like all of a sudden, like the popularity seems to rise. But again, that could be a good thing with, some of these younger listeners that don't really know Doom. They're just like, oh, Tyler the Creator, oh, Denzel, Earl Sweatshirt, JPEG Mafia, like whoever you want to kind of put in that mold of like Doom kind of, the guys that kind of followed Doom and followed that blueprint a little bit. So it's interesting.
Definitely.
And,
Definitely. Well, the scary thing about Nipsey, actually, I had something that was similar to like your Doom stories that like I wasn't a huge Nipsey fan probably until like a year before he died. Like I had that's when he was gaining a lot more social media popularity and kind of making some more crossover tracks. And then I went back and listened to a lot of his Crenshaw mixtapes, and then Victory Lap dropped, and I loved Victory Lap. And when I saw it was getting nominated, it was amazing.
Really good.
And it was only so long after that he had gotten killed. And I was just glad that I was able to enjoy his music and enjoy him while he was here a little bit before the wave, of all the reactions after he passed. That one was like kind of eerie to me though too, because it was like somebody who I had just got on recently before he had passed, and it was really I started buying in, and I was like, I want to see this guy win.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's even kind of a different experience than either one. Like growing up with Max, seeing the progression versus like, oh, heard Doom, but liked his stuff, wasn't like a stan, but like respected him, yada yada yada. Versus like someone you just get onto and you have all this hope for, and then
it was really sad, very 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 sad.
Yeah, I didn't really love Victory Lap or get into it as much until after he passed. So again, that was like, and then I was like, wow, like how did I miss this? And then, but is there that bias too of like now he's gone that all of a sudden I love it? Like I don't, you know what I mean? But I think part of it too is like I hadn't really fully heard it
exactly.
As well, like the whole project. Regardless, like I'd heard a couple individual songs, but, like Dedication with Kendrick Lamar. I was like, oh, Kendrick, like because at that time I was very much like. Kendrick Lamar? Oh, okay.
Of course.
Boom. Like anything with Kendrick, I'm going to listen to. So, shame on, not shame on me per se, but like, I guess there is so much music out there, but it's again, it's an interesting conversation, but I mean, in kind of how the posthumous, reactions usually can go, but it's a very, very tragic moment for them. And I think for the whole hip hop world and music world in general. So,
and it was just the freaking icing on the cake for 2020, man. It was
that too
ridiculous.
That too. Where it's like, wow, like we're finally trying to get out of this year, and then right before midnight we have to hear more bad news. It's like, wow, great.
I guess it fits. I guess
Seriously,
it fits. It's consistent. If there's one thing 2020 had, it was a consistent aesthetic
of just solemn, just tragic,
sad
moments,
and trash.
All of it, man. But anyway, but again, rest in peace and rest in power to MF Doom, and again, definitely all thinking about his family and friends and the hip hop community.
And rest in peace to all the other rappers and musicians that we've lost in 2020 or in just the past couple of years. I think we've honestly gone through a very unique stage in hip hop where we're seeing more and more people go, whether it's untimely endings or if we're just getting to that stage in our lives where it's happening, whether it's naturally. But I think it's still been an unexpected and a uniquely kind of sad couple of years in terms of who we're losing in hip hop.
Pop Smoke too, like obviously, and Juice WRLD, we lost them in 2020. I mean, I mean, hopefully that 2021 has a little less of that for sure. You know what I mean? But
rest in power, rest in peace. I don't want to get too sad. Let's celebrate them. Let's celebrate them. Go out, listen to MF Doom, stream Mad Villainy, stream Czarface, stream it all
of it. Danger Mouse, right? All that good stuff. I don't know how I forgot we forgot to talk about Danger Mouse. I love that album too.
Yeah.
Hey. Leave us a comment. Like I said, let us know what were your favorite MF Doom memories, projects. What was your take on MF Doom? And if you haven't heard him, definitely go stream his music.